My family called me a failure, a dropout who'd never amount to anything. Then, at my brother's engagement dinner, his fiancée gasped, "Wait, you're the Michael Carter?" The room froze. My father, the man who'd spent years tearing me down, couldn't utter a word. "Hey, thanks for being here. My name's Michael Carter. And yeah, this one's a tough story. It's about money, betrayal, and how the people you love the most can make you feel like a stranger at your own table. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you've bent over backwards for family, only to be met with silence or worse. If so, this one's for you. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I like knowing I'm not just yelling into the void. All right, let me take you back. I'm standing in my kitchen. It's late. The fridge is humming louder than usual, and there's mail scattered all over the counter, bills mostly, and then I see it. A thick, expensive-looking envelope. Cream cardstock, gold trim, even one of those wax seals like it came out of some royal castle. I open it up, and right there in calligraphy that probably cost more than my month's rent, it says, "Jason Carter and Sarah Miller request your company for their engagement dinner." Jason, my younger brother. The golden boy who could do no wrong, even when he did plenty. Me? I'm the other one. The 32-year-old disappointment who paid his way through community college, worked double shifts, and still came up short in the family group chat. You see, my parents made it real clear real early, Jason was their future. I was just background noise. Still, I swallowed my pride. I figured it's family, you show up, you bring a gift, you smile through the awkward small talk. I mean, that's what we do, right? We keep the peace even when the peace costs everything we've got. But here's the thing. That invitation, that wasn't where it started, and it sure as hell wasn't where it ended. What came after what really happened, well, let's just say, I wouldn't wish that kind of cold, calculated betrayal on anyone. Years ago, I walked out of medical school, and from that moment on, I became the family disappointment, the one they whispered about at reunions and shook their heads over during quiet car rides home. I still remember the sting in my nose from the formaldehyde in the anatomy lab. I can still hear the sound of metal trays clinking, the hush of other students dissecting in silence. That day, I stood in my father Richard's study, heart racing, palms sweating, and said the words that would change everything. "I can't do this anymore." I was expecting an argument, maybe even yelling. But what I got was worse. Silence. Not the kind that gives space. No, this was the kind that hits you like a wall. Cold. Empty. A silence that followed me for weeks like a shadow. Dad only broke it once, with words that hit harder than anything else. "You just threw away a golden opportunity after everything we sacrificed." That study lined with leather-bound books, the heavy airs scented with success and cigar smoke, it wasn't a room anymore, it was a courtroom. And I'd just been sentenced to a lifetime of quiet shame. Mom wasn't much different, she didn't yell, but her disappointment screamed through every sigh, every forced smile. She would clutch her chest dramatically while talking to her sisters on the phone, whispering just loud enough for me to hear, "He's just lost. We don't know what's next for him." She never asked why I left or what I actually wanted from life. Instead, she mourned me like I had died, like I was some version of myself that she could no longer recognize. "Michael, we just worry about your future," she'd say, with that pitiful tilt of her head, the kind that makes you feel small and foolish for even existing outside their blueprint. Then there was Jason, my little brother. He didn't just follow the path they paved it for him. Ivy League business degree, finance job with a view from the 39th floor, and a luxury condo that practically screamed golden child. At family dinners, he was the main event. One Christmas, while the scent of roasted turkey and pine needles filled the air, I watched my dad slap Jason's back and brag about his latest bonus and the Rolex he gifted himself. "That's my boy," he said proudly, "setting the world on fire." I tried to speak. I brought up a small project I was working on, a tech platform that helped folks in underserved communities find free clinics, food banks, and support groups. I thought it mattered. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd see some value in that. But Dad only gave me a polite nod. "That's nice, son. Good to keep busy." And Jason, he chuckled, offered me one of those fake serious looks and said, "You should get serious, Mike." His voice sounded casual, but his eyes didn't lie. They said, "You'll never catch up." I spent the next few years trying to make something out of nothing. Part-time jobs, late-night coding gigs, sleeping in apartments so small that turning around in the kitchen meant bumping into the fridge. The smell of cheap ramen and old carpet became my normal. I'd stay up late staring at the ceiling, wondering if they were right. Maybe I had thrown everything away. Maybe I was just a mistake wrapped in regret. I didn't date, I didn't dream, I just floated. Everything I'd built with my own hands, but it never felt like enough. Not when you're still carrying the weight of being the family's what went wrong. And yet, even while I carried that burden, I kept giving, quietly, behind the scenes. When Jason had a startup idea he wanted to float, but didn't want to risk his own money, I chipped in $5,000. Didn't tell anyone. When my parents wanted to remodel their kitchen but fell short on funds, I sent a check labeled "for emergencies." I never once asked for credit. I just wanted them to see me not as a failure, not as a shadow, but as someone who still cared. Someone who, despite all the bruises, still came back to the table. And for a while I thought maybe, just maybe, that was enough. But I should have known better. In this family, silence wasn't forgiveness. It was just the pause before the next cut. Then came Access Path. It didn't start like some big tech dream or billion-dollar pitch. It started quiet, just me, volunteering at a local disability resource center. I watched people, real people, struggle to get the most basic healthcare info. They weren't asking for luxury, just the name of a doctor who would treat them with respect, a place with a wheelchair ramp, someone who would listen instead of rushing them out the door. The system was a mess. No one knew where to start, and that kind of frustration, it lit something inside me. Not rage, not sadness, something sharper, purpose. So I did what I could. I started teaching myself to code. I'd never been a tech guy, but I was desperate to build something that mattered. Nights blurred together in that tiny apartment, sitting cross-legged on the floor with my second-hand laptop heating up my legs. The air always smelled like leftover takeout and dust, but I kept going. I created a simple database, a map of accessible healthcare providers. It wasn't much, but it worked. Then, one night, an email came in from a woman in Ohio. She said my program helped her find a doctor who finally understood her rare condition. "Thank you," she wrote, 2 words, but they hit me like a lightning strike. I sat there, staring at that email for what felt like hours. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was on the right path. Access Path wasn't just a project anymore, it became my mission. It gave me back my sense of worth, even if no one in my family cared. Everything changed at a small tech meetup in a rented office basement that smelled like stale pizza and burnt coffee. That's where I met David Chun. He was sharp, sarcastic, and had the kind of brain that made you feel like you were standing next to a lightning bolt. We talked for hours about the gaps in the system, the invisible people falling through the cracks. David believed in Access Path before I fully did. He saw the scale, the potential, the need. He didn't see a failed med student. He saw a builder. Within a week, we became co-founders. We worked out of this tiny office above a print shop. The walls were yellowed, the air thick with ink fumes, and David's strong espresso. The place buzzed with energy. It was chaos, but it was our chaos. We poured everything into the platform. Late nights, missed meals. But then the numbers started climbing. 10,000 users, then 50. Then we got our first grant from a local nonprofit. Then a partnership with a state health department. We were making something real, something big. We hired a small team, we rolled out new features, we heard from more people, veterans, single moms, immigrants, folks who had felt invisible their whole lives were now finding care, finding help because of us. Each milestone felt like a small rebellion, a silent middle finger to the family who had once said, "I threw it all away." I tried to share the success. I called Mom one Sunday, voice buzzing with excitement, and told her about a new pilot program we'd launched that could help over 30,000 people with chronic conditions. She didn't ask a single question. Instead, she said, "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Jason got a promotion? He's buying a boat." Like clockwork, that gut punch feeling, yeah, it came back, but it didn't flatten me like it used to. I nodded through the phone call, then hung up and went back to work. I realized that no matter what I did, to them, Jason would always be the headline. I was just background noise. But the world outside my family, it was listening, it was watching, and it was growing. Then came the engagement dinner. The family group chat lit up like Times Square, heart emojis, glitter gifs, photos of Sarah's ring that looked like it could blind a person. I typed a short "congrats," hit send, and immediately muted the chat. I knew what was coming. The lead up, the pressure, the fake smiles, the polite digs from Dad, the sideways glances from Jason, the complete emotional invisibility from Mom. But this time was different. That night, while I stood in front of my closet trying to decide what to wear, I paused and pulled up Access Path's dashboard. 80,000 users, 80,000 real people, not imaginary achievements or polite golf claps, not fake praise from people who'd never understand what I was building. I was helping people, making something that mattered. I looked at myself in the mirror and smiled just a little. I reached past the beige, boring suit Mom always liked, the one she said made me look presentable, and grabbed the charcoal one. Sleek, sharp, unapologetic. It wasn't about fashion, it was about choosing myself. That night, I wasn't going to shrink. Not anymore. The Toys was one of those places where the chandeliers are too bright, the waiters wear gloves, and you feel like you've walked into someone else's dream. It reeked of power and wealth, exactly the kind of place my parents adored. Just being there made my skin itch. I handed my keys to the valet and adjusted my collar, which suddenly felt like it was choking me. My shoes clicked against the marble floors as I stepped inside, trying to steady my breathing. At a long table near the center of the room, there they were, my whole family, perfectly arranged like a magazine ad. Dad leaned back like he owned the place, tossing around stories of his career to Sarah's parents, acting like he was some kind of kingmaker. Mom sat beside him, smoothing invisible wrinkles on Sarah's blazer, fussing over her with a kind of pride I'd never seen aimed at me. Jason sat across from them, grinning, relaxed, in a suit that probably cost more than everything I was wearing combined. He looked like a man who thought he'd already won. "Michael! Glad you made it," Dad said as I approached. His handshake was limp, his eyes scanning the room for someone more important. Mom gave me a quick hug, her perfume hitting me like a wall of fake sweetness. "You look neat," she added, as if it surprised her I could dress myself. The only one who actually looked at me, really looked at me, was Sarah. Her smile wasn't forced, her handshake was real. "Nice to meet you, Michael," she said warmly, and for a second, I didn't feel like an outsider. But that moment passed. The dinner quickly turned into a celebration of Jason, his recent promotion, the way he managed portfolios like a wizard, the new vacation home in Aspen they'd already started talking about. When Sarah's dad, Arthur, turned to me and asked, "And what do you do, Michael?" I opened my mouth to answer, but my dad jumped in. "Michael's our free spirit," he said with a chuckle that sliced through me. "Always chasing butterflies, doing passion projects, I guess." His laughter echoed like a slap in the face. I forced a smile and mumbled, "I run a tech company." But Mom was already guiding the conversation back to Jason's latest financial conquest. I just sat there, staring at my plate, the food suddenly tasteless and heavy. And then, out of nowhere, Sarah leaned forward. "Access Path?" she asked gently. "That's the company you run, right? You help people with disabilities?" I nodded, caught off guard. Her eyes lit up. "Wait, are you Michael Carter? Like the Michael Carter, the CEO of Access Path?" For a second, no one moved. It was like time hit pause. Somewhere in the room, a fork dropped. Dad's wine glass froze halfway to his mouth. Mom's hand shot up to her pearls like she was in church. Jason looked like someone had unplugged him. But Sarah kept going, oblivious to the landmine she'd just stepped on. "Access Path is amazing," she said, her voice full of genuine excitement. "My brother Mark was paralyzed 3 years ago. He says Access Path was a lifesaver. His doctors use it all the time to help patients find resources. He found a whole adaptive sports program through you guys. It gave him purpose again." She went on about the database, the community forums, the telehealth directory, all the things I'd poured years into building while my parents looked the other way. "We've been trying to reach someone from your team for a partnership," she added with a laugh, "but it's been hard to get past your contact form." Then she frowned a little, like she'd just remembered something strange. "Oh, Mark said he heard a man talking at some gala. He was bragging about his successful son in finance, but when someone asked about his other son, he laughed and said something like, 'He's doing some little website for the disabled. It's sweet, but not a real career.' The guy's name was Carter. First name Henderson or something, and just like that, everything snapped into place. Henderson, Dad's golf buddy. The same guy who once called and asked me if I'd help his cousin with a resume and then joked that I played around on the internet. This wasn't some misunderstanding. This wasn't my parents not knowing what I did. This was calculated. They had been downplaying my success on purpose for years because admitting I'd made something real would mean admitting they were wrong, admitting they had judged me unfairly, admitting they didn't know me at all. Dad's face drained of color. Mom made a soft sound like a whimper. Jason stared like he didn't know what world he was in anymore. I took a breath and finally spoke, my voice steady. "Access Path has over 80,000 users across 15 states. We've partnered with 3 state health agencies. We just closed a major funding round last quarter, and our nonprofit waitlist is growing faster than we can onboard them." The silence that followed was thick. No one tried to interrupt, no one laughed it off. They couldn't. The numbers didn't lie. The story didn't bend this time. I had built something, And for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for approval. I was stating facts. The rest of the dinner felt like I was floating underwater. The clinking glasses, the quiet coughs, the shifting silverware, it all faded into background noise. Sarah's parents turned to me with real curiosity, asking about Access Path like it actually meant something. Like I meant something. And for the first time, I answered without shrinking. I explained the impact, the mission, and they listened. Really listened. Dad didn't say much. His face was frozen in that tight expression he wears when things don't go to plan. For a second, I thought I saw something in his eyes, maybe surprise, maybe pride, but it vanished before I could trust it. Mom gave her usual line, the fallback for every uncomfortable truth. "We just wanted the best for you," she said, voice trembling. But the words didn't land like they used to. They sounded thin, empty, like a rehearsed apology with no heart behind it. Jason, the star of the night, sat stiff in his chair, his usual glow dimmed. He didn't speak much after that. Maybe because the story he'd built around himself, Jason the success, Michael the failure, had finally cracked. I stayed just long enough to be polite, then slipped out before dessert. The night air was cold, and for the first time in a long time it felt good on my skin, like freedom. A few days passed. Then came the calls. Mom was first, her voice full of that forced cheerfulness that always meant she wanted something. "We're just so proud of you," she said, as if those words weren't years too late. Dad left a voicemail, stiff and uncertain, asking if we could talk about this Access thing sometime. I didn't call back. I let their messages sit unplayed, unneeded. I used to ache for their praise. I used to lie awake at night, wishing they'd say they were proud. But now, their approval didn't feel like a reward. It felt like a reflex, something they reached for when the crowd clapped, not because they saw me, but because others finally did. Sarah reached out, embarrassed. She apologized for the scene, for bringing up my name the way she did. But I stopped her. "You told the truth," I said. "Thank you for seeing me." And that moment, surprisingly, turned into something real. We started talking more, not just about Jason or the wedding or the family drama, but about work, impact, purpose. She understood what I was building in a way no one in my family ever had. In a twist I didn't see coming, Sarah became a quiet, steady friend. Maybe even more than that someday, but for now, she was a bright light in a dark mess. I met up with Jason too. I thought maybe we could clear the air. But the moment we sat down, I knew it wasn't going to be some heartwarming brother moment. He was defensive, edgy. "I knew Access Path was big," he said, barely looking at me. "I didn't tell them because you were always the sensitive one. I was the one who made sense. I was the winner. If you were suddenly the tech genius, then what was I?" And just like that, I saw it. It wasn't about me failing. It was about him needing to stay ahead. His confession didn't make me angry. It just broke something inside. That last little string of hope that my family's silence had been accidental. That maybe they didn't know, but they knew. They just didn't want to change the story. Later, I sat down with my parents. No yelling, no tears, just the truth. I told them how it felt growing up in the shadow of a son they worshipped, while being told my dreams were childish. "I didn't need your applause," I said. "I needed to be seen, not for what you wanted, but for who I am." They sat quiet. They didn't argue. But it didn't really matter. I wasn't there for their reaction. I was there to let go. And I did. I walked away feeling lighter than I ever had. Not angry, not hurt, just free. Access Path kept growing. Our team became my chosen family. People who believed in the mission, in the work, in me. I built healthy boundaries with my parents. Calls every now and then, but no more chasing their approval. I didn't need it anymore. At Jason and Sarah's wedding, I showed up in a clean suit, smiled for photos, clapped politely during speeches. I didn't linger. Sarah's smile still felt real, still felt warm. My parents' glances didn't sting. They were just people I used to try so hard to impress, and now they were just people. The last scene, picture this. I'm standing on stage at a national healthcare tech conference. The spotlight is warm. My heart's racing, but it's not fear, it's purpose. I talk about Access Path. I talk about connection, dignity, access, hope. I talk about the people we've helped and the ones we're still trying to reach. The room is full, doctors, patients, lawmakers, innovators, they're listening. They're leaning in. This right here is my moment. Not the dinner table, not the family group chat, not some lukewarm compliment from Dad. This is my story now. I spent years trying to fit their mold, to win their game. But the real victory was building something that mattered, something that lit me up from the inside. And that didn't come from their praise. It came from believing in myself when no one else would. So let me ask you this. What's the story you're finally ready to rewrite?